I have some mini reading trackers here, and I'm going to show you them in detail, and I also have some examples of how you could incorporate them into your bullet journal spreads. So because these trackers are so customizable, if you are a new reader, you can use these as a way of motivating yourself to start reading every day or to hit some page number goal that you have. Or if you're a more experienced reader or a really avid reader, you could use these trackers as a way of monitoring different, more complex reading goals that you might have. So let's jump in and take a closer look at some of these mini reading trackers I came up with. So you'll see that I have 6 different mini reading trackers, all fitting on one Leuchtturm A5 dotted notebook page. I don't suggest cramming these all onto one page. I just did this so that I could put them in one place so that you could refer back to them and so that you could see that they really are quite mini. Starting at the top of this page, I'm going to take this Jane Austen bookmark that I made, and I'll link the video if you're interested in seeing how I did that. I'm gonna just cover up this tracker here so that we can kind of just look at this first tracker or these 2 variations on this one tracker. So this is one way that you could keep track of how much you're reading during the month, but again, it's really customizable, so you could do it as a weekly tracker or you could put multiple months together. It's really up to you. But I have 2 variations on this tracker, one which is a calendar view and one which is just 2 rows. I included both because some people prefer to have their monthly spreads as a calendar, and some like to have their spreads with one day of the week on each line going down the page. So I decided to have these 2 variations on this mini tracker in case you prefer calendar spreads or sort of straight line clean cut spreads. And the second reason is these are mini trackers meant to be plugged in wherever you think they might go, or if you have any blank spaces that you want to fill, and those spaces are different shapes and sizes. So if you have space that is maybe a larger square or a longer, skinnier rectangle, you can choose one of these that will fit best in your blank space. So I set this up with 2 colors, one being if you read over 10 pages but fewer than 50 pages, and one if you read 50 or more pages. If you're just trying to get into the habit of reading, you may just want to choose one color for if you read, and then you would fill in the box if you did read that day, and then the days that you didn't read, you wouldn't fill in the box. Maybe you don't want to track if you've read 10 pages because you always read more than 10 pages, and maybe you just want to have a tracker for the 50 pages or for 25 pages or 75 pages. That's really up to you. Now this doodle here is really just a doodle. I had a blank space that I filled, but if you are interested in seeing a tracker that might look kind of like that, then check out the TBR video and bullet journal spread that I did for the Tome Topple TBR, because I am using a tracker that looks a little bit like that. So taking this bookmark away, there is another mini tracker, and it's pages read. I put a sort of an arbitrary page number goal of 600 at the top. I marked 100, 200, and so on. And this is just a way that you can track your reading if you have a page number goal. Like this version of the other tracker, it's nice because it can fit in the margins somewhere. So if you just have a little bit of extra room in the margins of one of your pages in your bullet journal or your journal or wherever, then you can stick this tracker there. This next tracker I have, I'm calling a time tracker. Sometimes trackers are great to just kind of get an idea of how you're spending your time, or how, what sort of activities you're doing when. And so I took that idea and made a mini reading tracker out of it. So this isn't just tracking your reading. I chose 2 other habits that I might be interested in seeing how they relate to time spent reading. So I chose reading, watching TV, and time on social media. And I have the days of the week down here, amount of time. I didn't actually use this tracker, I just filled in some numbers to see what it would look like. So reading is blue. I can look and see how much time I was spending reading during the week. TV is pink, social is that orangey brown, and so I can look for any patterns that there might be. Maybe I read a lot during the week, but not so much on the weekends. Maybe I spend more time on social media on certain days than others. Maybe if I'm spending more time on social media, I'm spending less time reading. And this just gives you sort of a visual idea of how you're spending your time and how they might be related to one another. And if you feel like doing the math, you can include this pie chart like I did at the end of the week so that you have another type of visual for how you're spending your time. So again, these are sort of made up numbers, but I tried to ballpark it in what I might find for myself, and that would be it was about 40% of the time on social, 42% on reading, and then the remainder with TV. So if you do feel like doing that, then you would just calculate the totals for each of these, add them together for a grand total of time that you've tracked here. And then you would just do some division where you're doing amount of time reading divided by the total amount of time that you tracked on here. So the next mini tracker is for books bought versus books read. This is something I'm hearing a lot about on BookTube, and that is like people putting themselves on book buying bans. So if you have a bit of a book buying problem, then this tracker may work well for you, where you can track during the month or the week or the multiple months, whatever scale you want to do this on. You can track how many you are reading versus how many you are buying. Now, I designed it where the books is going up because ideally we would like to be reading more books than we are buying. So this is sort of like that visual reminder that I want this bar to be higher than this bar. There isn't any sort of goal built into this one. You may have a goal of I want to read 6 books this month and I want to only buy 3 or fewer books. If that's the way that you want to do it, then you could mark somewhere that you do have, you can put a line of what your goal was, and then you can, your bar might be under it, it might be over it, might be spot on. But this one that I made doesn't have a specific goal in mind. It's just getting an idea of what I'm buying versus what I'm reading. And at the bottom is something that you may have seen in my TBR and bullet journal spreads for the Booktubeathon and Biannual Bibliothon, as well as that same Tome Topple TBR video. And that is reading trackers that are inspired by the Goodreads trackers, where you fill them in as you go along. So you get that another visual of how much you're reading. You can put the page number here if you want. I've done multiple, I didn't fill in the titles, but just so that you can see that you can have multiple books going at the same time. And that's really when I like to use these trackers. I don't really tend to use them if I'm just reading one book at a time. But if I'm reading multiple, then I like to have multiple going at once, so that if I'm not making progress on one of them, I can look over and say, oh, well, actually, if I think about all the pages I've read between the 3 books, then I'm actually doing pretty well. I added a bit of embellishment here with currently reading in some books, but if you really have a small amount of space, then you can just get rid of that and just have these bars. So those are some ideas I had for mini reading trackers. You can use these on their own, but I'm also going to show you some examples of how you might incorporate them into your bullet journal spreads.